Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report. And of course, we're happy that you can join us. Now, first, I want to acknowledge my birthday, which I celebrated last Friday, September 26th. And of course, I'm extremely grateful for another revolution around the sun and thankful for the many blessings that have come my way. Of course, we only live once, and those of us who are blessed to take advantage of the opportunities that this life gives us should do so. And certainly, my mantra in this life is that I will be grateful and thankful for all of the opportunities that have come my way, but that I would also live life to the fullest, knowing that tomorrow is not promised. Of course, this weekend, folks, I'm away celebrating my birthday in Atlanta, Georgia, but also celebrating a double celebration. It's not only my birthday, but it's the baby shower of my dearest god sister, Jazil Moraine of Pomrose in St. David. Of course, Jazil is the mother of Myrtle Moraine and the granddaughter of Miss Finn. Of course, for those of you in St. David's, you know Miss Finn as that person who was one of the Maypole dancer teachers, instructors in St. David and, of course, Grenada. So Myrtle is Miss Finn's granddaughter, and I'm away celebrating with her her baby shower. And of course, I will get to see some of her siblings and, of course, her lovely mom, Myrtle Moraine, who was, of course, a very good friend of my dearly departed mother, Nancy Bubb. And of course, next week I will also be away on work-related business. So we will do apologize in advance for not having live segments where we can take your comments on the program. But certainly, we still managed to produce two programs with the same quality that you've come to expect from us here at the Bub Report. And of course, before we get into the first segment of the program, I want to use this opportunity to shout out Mr. Thomas Charles. Mr. Charles is a sales associate out there at the Marlowe Furniture store in Laurel, Maryland. Now, I happened to walk into the store a week and a half ago after my gym run and had a chance encounter with Mr. Charles. In fact, he was the one to approach me to ask me if I needed help. At the time, I said, no, I don't really need help. I'm just looking around. But of course, I was in civilian clothing. I was in gym clothes, my shorts, t-shirt, my gym shirt, because I just got out of the gym, Snickers. And he did not recognize me at first, but he recognized my voice. So that is that is a thing. People tend to recognize my voice before they recognize me. And of course, people say they also recognize the beads. Of course, I was not wearing the beads at the time. But of course, Mr. Charles, it was good running into you, sir. And of course, Mr. Charles, he lives here in the Maryland area, but he's from Bylands in St. Andrew. And he also sold me a nice couch, which I'm happy with, very, very happy with that purchase there, my dear Grenadian brother. So it was very, very, very good running into you there. That's Thomas Charles. His name is Thomas Charles from Bylands in St. Andrews. So it's always good to run into Grenadians here in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. And of course, Mr. Charles is also an avid viewer of the Bub Report, and we thank you, Mr. Charles, for being an avid viewer of the program. And of course, if you're in the Maryland area, be sure to check out Marlowe's Furniture there in Laurel. I do believe they have a number of other stores in the area, but I know that that location, they're currently having a clearance sale. Shameless plug there, Mr. Charles, for your store. But the folks are really nice, and of course, I know that they will take care of you. Now, folks, before we get into the next segment, we also want to bring to your attention to the folks in the DMV area, to the folks in Maryland and in Northern Virginia and in DC, of course, the Helping Hands. And I will go ahead and share the screen for that information now. They're having a fundraiser. So the Helping Hands Ministry, they are a Grenadian American philanthropic ministry, a faith-based ministry. They're having a fundraiser. Let's see if I can pull that up now. That fundraiser will be held on, let me just expand that, make it a bit larger here. That fundraiser will be held on the 5th of October. That's next week, the 5th of October. It's their annual Grab and Go fundraiser from 12:30 to 3 p.m. And it's over there at 6303 Riggs Road in Hyattsville, Maryland. Of course, on the menu, they have curry chicken, curry goat, vegetarian option. They have dal puri and bus up shot, pumpkin, potatoes and chana, mango, ancha, spinach, and so much more. Of course, you can Zelle them at hhministrygroup@gmail.com. Of course, that's if you're not going to be attending. Or you can call or text to order at 301-792-4722 or at 202-793-1133. And of course, donations are also accepted. Of course, Helping Hands, their fundraising efforts goes towards the support of the Grenada Kidney Foundation as well as mobility support aids projects there. So that's the Helping Hands Ministry. They're having that activity, that fundraiser happening. It's a grab and go on October 5th out there in Hyattsville, Maryland at 6303 Riggs Road. And of course, the Grenada Embassy, if you need more information, you can contact the Grenada Embassy as well. Because they're the ones that published that information. And of course, one final announcement before we get to the first segment of the program. And that is from the office of the County Executive of Prince George's County here in Maryland. Of course, we know that the County Executive of Prince George's County here in Maryland is Aisha Braveboy, Grenadian American Aisha Braveboy, the daughter of Cuthbert Braveboy. She made history in the county by becoming the first Grenadian American, I don't know if she's the first Caribbean American to, let me just stop sharing this here. She's the first Caribbean American maybe to occupy the office of County Executive in Maryland. Of course, she's having a 100-day event, following her election as the County Executive. Okay, and there we are. That is the Prince George's County Executive Aisha Braveboy. The message says, join the office of the County Executive in celebrating 100 days of elevating Prince George's. Of course, that event is being held on October 4th, 2025. That's Saturday, October 4th, this next week, Saturday, from 12 to 5 p.m. at Watkins Park. It starts at 12 p.m. and Watkins Park is located at 301 Watkins Park Drive. That is in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. That event is happening there. So, of course, there's a QR code. So if you can scan that QR code and get more information on what the County Executive, that's Miss Aisha Braveboy, is having in observance of 100 days of being elected as the County Executive for the County of Prince George's there. Of course, Aisha Braveboy having very, very deep Grenadian and African roots as well. So we, again, congratulate her. So, folks, this is the Bub Report. What we will do now is to take a quick break and come back for the first segment of the program. So please stand by for that conversation.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9799 9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome to the first segment of the Bob Report this week. We're happy that you can join us. Now, the political declaration of the third high-level meeting of the United Nations General Assembly on the prevention and control of non-communicable diseases, Resolution 73-2, authorizes the President of the United Nations General Assembly to convene the fourth level meeting on non-communicable diseases in 2025. Of course, non-communicable diseases, including cardiovascular illnesses, cancers, diabetes, as well as chronic respiratory illnesses and mental health conditions, are the leading causes of death, morbidity, and disability globally. Now, in 2021, more than 43 million people globally died from non-communicable diseases, accounting for 75% of non-pandemic related deaths. Now, 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death were linked to non-communicable diseases. A staggering 86% of premature NCD deaths occur in low and middle income countries such as Grenada, where the social, economic, and physical environment provides less protection from the risks and consequences of non-communicable diseases, as well as mental health disorders. Now, most of these deaths, of course, could be prevented through timely, comprehensive, and integrated preventive, diagnostic, curative, and palliative healthcare services that are accessible and context appropriate, as well as coherent policy, legislative, and regulatory measures. Now, without urgent concerted action, the long-term trajectory of these diseases and conditions will have profound socioeconomic impacts on individuals, communities, and societies, including Grenada. Now, the burden of these non-communicable diseases and mental health conditions certainly hinders economic growth by weakening human capital and reducing workforce participation. Now, on the sidelines of this year's United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York, Grenada hosted a high-level meeting to coincide with supporting global efforts to achieve the set of 9 voluntary targets set by the World Health Assembly in 2013 for 2025, measured against a 2010 baseline, which will enable countries to achieve the Sustainable Goal Target 3.4 by 2030, which is to reduce 1/3 premature mortality from non-communicable diseases. Of course, here to make sense of the state of non-communicable diseases in Grenada and the state of health outcomes as well as mental health is Dr. Jane Noel, who is currently the chair of Grenada's National Chronic Non-Communicable Disease Commission. Dr. Noel, welcome to this week's edition of the Bob Report.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. That was a mouthful that I articulated here in the introduction, but I always feel as if context matters in these conversations. So let us begin by talking about the Non-Communicable Disease Commission. I want to get this right again. You are the chair of the National Council on Non-Communicable Disease Commission. Is that correct?
Near enough. yes. So yeah, it's a whole tongue twister. We NCNCDC. I've said it so many times. I say it quickly.
Yes.
But yes, I'm the current chair. Yes.
Yes. So talk to us before we get into conversations. Of course, we know that the UN General Assembly is happening. Grenada is hosting this meeting around non-communicable diseases to align with the Sustainable Development Goals. But talk to us about your commission and the work that your commission does and the reason why there is a need for this commission in the first place.
Well, that's an interesting one. So if we look back a little in history, back in 2007, the CARICOM heads of government met in Trinidad. And out of that meeting, in fact, the meeting was called because there was such concern about the rising levels of NCDs within the Caribbean region. And out of that, there were certain recommendations. And one was that each nation form a chronic disease commission, which would assist government in an advisory role. So really advising on policy, advising on situations, and advocacy and education for the general public. So back in, that was on the 15th of September 2007. So that was called the Port of Spain Declaration in Trinidad. So in Grenada, a commission was set up, but it didn't really become fully active until 2010. And in 2010, it really took place. It had its membership. So the membership comes from is designated through cabinet, as is the chair, and it has members sitting on it, almost sort of more than 25 members who come from different walks of life within Grenada. So we have obviously the chief medical officer sits on it. We have the chief pharmacy, the chief nursing officers. So we have that medical input, but we also have other representatives. So we have let me see, we have the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council. We also have trade unions. We have religious aspect. So we have different people from different areas who will have input into the commission. So I took over in end of 2022. So with COVID, everything had become a little dormant. The current chair had decided to step down. He'd been there for quite a while. So I was asked by cabinet to take up this role. So November 2022, I took position and we kind of reformed. We invited new people from the different bodies to sit on the commission and really start. So it was a little slow process, but since 2022, we've become much more active. We've been involved with looking at new policies. We've recently completed a childhood obesity policy and action plan that has been reviewed by the Ministry of Health and other ministries in government and is just waiting for tabling at cabinet. So that's very exciting. That's a first for Grenada and could have huge impact on chronic disease, which we can talk about a little later. And we've been involved with other policy reviews, such as the tobacco bill, which is another one that's hugely important for chronic disease. There's obviously tobacco and tobacco smoking and the increase of vaping in the youth in Grenada is very worrying. So hopefully that is the legislation at the moment. So we've been gradually becoming more involved. We are involved a lot with education and education, especially for the medical fraternity. So we do a lot of continued medical education. We also are part of the steering committee of the Caribbean Cancer Portal, which has been a new initiative that's been going on for the last year. So kind of that's kind of the crux of where we are and what we've been doing.
So let us talk about you articulated the scope of the work of the commission and the remit, why the commission was set up in the first place. But let us talk about those non-communicable disease burdens. Of course, in doing some research on just the state of non-communicable diseases and health in the Caribbean, it's certainly, while it's having a personal impact on families with respect to those chronic illnesses, it certainly also has an impact on the macro and microeconomic picture of the society as well. So let us talk about where we are. Are we seeing a sort of a worsening of the conditions, the material conditions of citizens around those non-communicable diseases, or with the knowledge that citizens have now? Of course, we have I dare to say people now have access to information in so many ways where they can seek to find answers on some of those disease burdens. But where are we when it comes to those non-communicable diseases? You mentioned
Yeah.
vaping here. You mentioned childhood obesity,
Obesity.
which, you know,
Yeah.
back in my day growing up in Grenada, that was not necessarily a thing because, you know, young people back then, we all went outside and played, you know, but now more of these
Mhm.
kids are indoors on their laptops, their cell phones and things like that.
Mhm.
So let us talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. There was a report in 22 by the WHO that looked at different countries' situations with mortality from chronic disease, and Grenada was no different from the other islands. Basically, 83% of deaths in Grenada are due to chronic disease, and there's a 23% chance of premature mortality as a result of having these diseases. So if I said, are we in a good state? No, I don't think we're in a good state, but it's the whole world over. It's not just Grenada. You've seen similar figures in Barbados, Trinidad, Dominica, Jamaica, and worldwide. And it's interesting, there are programs and there are things being done in Grenada, and I think there is hope. But I think talking about childhood obesity is something that is quite interesting. Every year, the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council do a daycare survey. And the data from 2024's daycare survey showed that 6.4% of our daycare children, now they're really tiny children, are overweight or obese. And that is an increase over the last few years of almost double. And that translates into older children becoming obese. So the estimate is now that at least 20% of our children over 12 years old are either overweight or obese, greater than 3% under 5 years. So those figures are not improving. If anything, they're getting worse. And like you say, I think it's due to lots of things. There are modifiable factors, which are things that we can change. And there are non-modifiable factors. You know, there's your genetics, there's other underlying medical conditions which you can't necessarily change. But there are things, you know, diet, exercise, which we know takes a part in it. And as you were saying, whereas before we were all outside, playing outside, you know, mothers looking for us because we're in the street playing till all hours. Now children are on their devices. They're not doing so much sport. They're not doing so much free play. And also it's the kinds of foods that we're eating. You know, you've got sugar sweetened beverages, you've got all the different kinds of processed foods that is now available in Grenada. I've been living in Grenada for over 30 years, and I've seen there's been a massive change as to what's available in the supermarkets for purchase and the cost of things in the supermarkets as well, which maybe some things are more affordable and fast foods are more affordable than they used to be. So children are potentially eating not as good a diet as they were and not exercising as not much. And that definitely has a fundamental impact on all chronic disease. It translates as children get older and you grow into adulthood to difficulty controlling sugar, risk of diabetes. Diabetes is huge in Grenada, and that's a lot of it is diet related. It's type 2 diabetes. You're not born with it, but you develop it mostly because of diet and exercise. And that's compounded with starting life having obesity. You've got increased risk of high cholesterol because of the diets. That can then translate to difficulties with hypertension, which can lead to cardiac issues and strokes. So one thing just compounds to another. And that's what we're seeing. And if you look at the death notices in Grenada, you're seeing young people in their 30s, people in their 40s, who I count as very young, dying from these illnesses, from strokes, from heart attacks, and the effects of diabetes. You see young people who are having amputations of toes because of poorly controlled diabetes. Now, a lot of these used to be old men disease, and they're not. They're now regular. And it is, I believe, a lot of it through change of lifestyle. And then we're seeing increases in cancer. So, we've got prostate cancer in men, but you're getting cervical cancer, breast cancer in more and more women. and other cancers, thyroid cancers, etc. So, you know, there is a tie-in, and this isn't just seen in Grenada, as I say, it's seen across the Caribbean, it's being seen across the world as well.
But let us talk, because as you said, this is sort of a new trend we're seeing, especially around the premature deaths. As you said, anecdotally, you look at the obituaries, every day. And again, as you said, people that I know, people who I went to school with, right, dying in their 30s, 40s, late 20s. But let us talk about, in the context of these non-communicable diseases, a lot of these diseases are in fact preventable. So, so my question is, with respect to the commission, the work, how is the commission working to inform, I don't know if you're forming government policy or working with those agencies that work with the public, with different communities, to ensure that, that public awareness that probably you're doing can also lead to a substantive change around lifestyle habits?
I mean, obviously, you can start at the bottom, you can start at the top. The top part is policy, so government policy. There has to be strong health policies. And that's something that we have been working on, certainly with this development of the childhood obesity policy. I think it's a very good document. And even some of that we've started implementing regardless, with certainly the education and medical fraternity. We've been in meetings with the Ministry of Education. We've just recently completed a water survey in schools. We went to between 40 and 50 schools to do water surveys. We're encouraging looking at implementing the Grenadian food and nutrition policies, which are sort of school feeding programs and other policies around schools, like the banning of sugar sweetened beverages and those kind of things in school. So once policy is in place, then you can enact policy. You've got like a structure that you can use to change things. It's like taxation on sugar sweetened beverages as well. So there are lots of things within that policy that once it gets passed, it will be a long haul, but it gives a structure as to how we can, and you can look at other countries who've developed policies like this, and have taken very bold steps with children and their nutrition, advertising, etc. Conflicts of interest in sporting events, and sporting events being sponsored by companies who produce food or drinks that are maybe not in the best interest of the children. So you've seen that in Mexico, you've seen that in Argentina, where there've been a radical reduction in childhood obesity numbers since they've implemented certain policies. So there's evidence out there. So it's really collecting evidence, using that evidence to write solid policies. So things are evidence-based, and then moving from there. So that's the top, and within those policies, there's the simple things, what they call low-hanging fruit. So simple things you can do right up to the difficult things that are hard to do. The commission one of the reasons for coming on your program is really so people can start understanding that we exist, and so that we have better communication with the media, so that we can pass our messages on to more people. We've been trying to organize some videos and things that we can use with parent-teacher associations for interest, because that reaches a huge amount of the population. We surveyed a lot of parents when we did our water survey, and overwhelmingly parents are saying we want better for our children. So if we can get messages out to the parents to help the children, that's going to be a really win-win situation for us. Also, there are things like the policy. We were involved with the Hearts Initiative. I don't know if you know about the Hearts Initiative.
No.
All right.
You're educating me today on that too.
I'm educating you today. So the Hearts Initiative is an excellent program. This is a program that's been put together through PAHO and WHO. And it's to really look, when you have a disease, ideally what you want is everyone to be, if you want, say, treated in the same way. Now, obviously, everyone needs slightly different treatments, but there needs to be standards, right? There needs to be standards in diagnosis. So the Heart Initiative is to do with hypertension, high blood pressure. So people have to be able to take their blood pressure properly. They need to know how to take blood pressure. There's no point taking your own blood pressure at home and you're not doing it correctly, then your readings aren't correct. So one of the rollouts of the program is educating people how to take their blood pressure. It's also using blood pressure machines that are calibrated properly. Not every blood pressure machine works properly. So it's having a stock in the pharmacies of affordable blood pressure machines that people who are suffering from blood pressure can have access to, right? It's also making sure that the nurses and the people in the clinics are taking the blood pressure properly. And then it's standardizing the medication so that, recorded and medication so that the pharmacists have stocks of affordable medication that we know works within Caribbean individuals, because some medications don't work as well in different ethnicities. So having well-stocked pharmacies with affordable medication that is in the hospital pharmacies for individuals. So everyone has access to affordable, good medication that we know works. And it's a tiered effect. So, if your blood pressure's here and you're taking this dose, if it's not working after so many weeks, the physicians will increase it to this dose. Then they might add a second dose. And they can do that in one tablet, a combined tablet, which makes it easier for the individual to take the medication instead of having a whole box of several medication. So standardizing practice, having available medication, and having proper diagnosis in the primary care situation. And I think that's important. Primary care. These diseases can be preventable by education, preventable by early screening and catching things before things get too out of hand, because then diet changes, exercise changes may prevent having to use medication. If you do have to use medication, because genetically some people are going to develop blood pressure, regardless of how well they behave with their diets and exercise, it's diagnosing it early, being on the medication early so damage isn't done. Because high blood pressure, it can damage the kidneys, it can damage other organs in your body. So being on medication early and regulating the blood pressure reduces the risks of other things that can come of it. So this Heart Initiative is a huge step forward for Grenada. And that is, in fact, one of the things that our Prime Minister would have been talking about at the UN high-level meeting, and to show that how successful or how well the rollout has gone. I mean, and there was a lot of background work. It was rolled out earlier in the year, but there's a lot of background work done with members of the General Hospital and members of the primary care settings, GPs, so that everyone is on the same page, rolling out information to the general public. We were in the Market Square. We teamed up and we were involved with the Ministry of Health, one of the rollout programs, checking blood pressure, teaching how people to take their blood pressure properly, advising on diets and different health aspects for hypertension. I think that was in March. We were all in St. George's Town Centre in the Market Square. So having events like that are in the public eye to educate has been very important. So this has been done with hypertension, and the rollout is going to continue, and the education process continue. And then hopefully programs like that are then going to come for diabetes and other respiratory disorders and other things, to take the same steps within other chronic diseases.
Mm-hmm. You reference education here, and I'm just curious. I mean, I remember when I was attending primary school and secondary school in Grenada, you did have a health education part of the curriculum. Part of that, I believe, in secondary schools, was in integrated science, but and food and nutrition to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But to what extent is education at the level of, or looking at the curriculum at both the primary and secondary school level, and even the tertiary institution at the TMI Community College, is something that the Commission is looking into with respect to perhaps looking at what is currently being taught, and perhaps looking at how that can be revamped to in line with the current conditions around NCDs.
I mean, that's very true. And we have been in meetings with education and the chief education officer. Health education is part of the both primary and senior school curriculum. And I know partly with the primary school because, at one point I took a gap from my medical career and actually taught in one of the primary schools in Grenada, and actually taught health education. So I know it's very much in there, and certainly schools do agriculture as well, which is an excellent subject. So within agriculture, they learn about different food groups, the different types of food you can grow, the different benefits of different schools' foods. And I know within the health education, which is part of the CPEA, so one of the brackets within science in CPEA is it's health science.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at all the different aspects of the body. There is a whole chunk on food, on carbohydrates, lipids, the effects on the body. Blood pressure as well. I remember having the children running up and down the school in the steps, checking blood pressure before and after exercise. And learning about weight and height and what's called your basal metabolic index. So, which is a measure of which you can use towards measuring obesity. That's how we measure obesity and overweight in children. So it is in the curriculum, but it's I don't know. It's whether children can do the curriculum. It's whether how much they're listening to it, how much they're taking in, and the relevance. So maybe it is perhaps trying to make it more relevant to the individuals. Mm-hmm. The way it's taught, So again, I mean, I know every year that with being with the schools, that Ministry of Education have courses for the teachers on different aspects of the curriculum, and this is maybe something that we can speak to Ministry of Education to have a specific one day of one of those meetings on how to deliver to the children to make it more, I think, more personal, maybe more personal and more hard hitting. I used to. With the older children, certainly in senior school, show them photographs. I used to show them photographs of diabetic feet. And, it's like not too shocking, but just shocking enough to make it a reality. And most children will know someone who is suffering with diabetes and the effects, leg ulcers, as I say, toes removed, a lot of children. Yeah. So it's making that connection that, how could I make sure this never happens to me? Mm-hmm, I think that's it, putting it into a real life context for children so they start to understand. Children understand more than we give them credit for sometimes.
Correct, especially this generation. They have they have the information at their thumb tips, their fingertips, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let us go on to talk about, you referenced the high-level meeting that, of course, that is being held on the sidelines of the UN. Now, before we even get to a conversation about that high-level meeting, now, one of the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 3 that I articulated in the intro, was the reduction of these non-communicable diseases, which, of course, that there are the spin-off effects of things like premature deaths and things like that. Mm-hmm. Are we going to be meeting those goals? Because I believe in listening to a lot of the public addresses by the leaders at the UN this year, a lot of them will be mourning the fact that we are falling short of a lot of the Sustainable Development Goals targets. And I suspect reducing non-communicable diseases as one of the goals is perhaps a target that we might be falling short on.
Yeah, I believe we are. And I mean, that is why it was so important that our leaders and our Caribbean leaders were present at this meeting, because, if we're small nations, right? Now, it's very easy for the larger nations. You've got Britain, you've got Germany, you've got the US, of course, Australia, larger countries who have their own different problems and different systems. Our system is slightly different. We have less resources. However you look at it, it's not, maybe we actually do live a healthy lifestyle in some ways because of our fresh air and our vitamin D, et cetera, but we have our own issues. And And it's important at meetings like this that there is representation from all the different communities. So I was so happy to see our own Prime Minister becoming Nick Mitchell at the UN and at the meeting and presenting on our Hearts Initiative. But I worldwide, no, we are not reaching our sustainability goals, which were aimed for 2030. We are all falling short. And so it will be very interesting to see what declarations come out of this meeting, how there are adjustments, and how the suggestions, how we can move forwards to reach our goals, and that goes for the different countries and the different things, as I say, we are low resource. So, suggestions as to how we as communities are going to move forwards. I mean, one I think is a pooling of resources. Our small states, Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, were small states with limited resources. I mean, one of the things we are doing, like I sit on the steering committee of the Caribbean Cancer Portal, which is an initiative that came out of Windriff at St. George's University, and it's been running it was a year in February. But we actually early next month, we have a meeting with, it's going to be 80 or 90 stakeholders to look at writing and overreaching cancer policy for the Caribbean. Now, that will be a huge step forward. It's going to be hard work, but we're having a huge scoping meeting. And so bringing the resources together between the small countries is going to be very, very important, I think, to fight various diseases, especially cancer, where treatments and diagnostics can be very expensive. So, I am really looking forward to see what our Prime Minister comes back with and what the declaration report is when it's issued.
Yeah, and you mentioned access to care and the cost of care. One of those issues, and I suspect you can tell me whether or not the Commission actually is advising government on this, and that has to do with the overall state of secondary healthcare in Grenada. We just referenced primary healthcare and what can be done at primary healthcare in the context of early detection, making sure that you manage your chronic illnesses and things like that. But at the level of secondary care, that is a major concern in Grenada. It's a perennial concern, and you hear people say things, sadly, when they go to the hospital, they cannot get medication. People think of the hospital as the waiting room to the morgue, as morbid as that may sound.
Yeah.
But anytime you reference hospital in Grenada, it really conjures up very morbid and depressive thoughts in the minds of citizens. So let us talk about the state of secondary care at the level of hospital delivery. Of course, capacity is one of those challenges and concerns that we have in respect of the specialists or the lack of specialists that's there with respect to the drain on the human resource capacity, the sort of export of nurses to other countries for more lucrative professions and things like that. So is that something that's on the minds of the Commission?
I mean, we haven't really been so involved in that. We've been more looking at sort of primary care and screening and those kind of topics. But I mean, obviously, it is an area of concern. I think we have good specialists, we just don't have enough of them. I think because what you said, human resources, I think the lack of human resources is one thing. And also, I think basic services. I think it's very easy to want fancy services, to put it in one way. I mean, my husband worked in the health service at the General Hospital for 30 years in orthopedics. So I'm kind of well versed in what happens in the General Hospital. But I think investment in basic services is really important. You know, blood tests, availability of blood tests, availability of reagents, availability of basic x-rays, availability of reporting, having enough staff to be able to report, and having enough, as you say, enough nursing staff, enough doctors, so they're not working ridiculous shifts and being overtired. And that's a whole nother question as to how you keep medical staff in this country. There are some people, Grenadians who've trained abroad, who've come back and given staunch service. Many of them friends of mine. But that's becoming less and less. You're seeing that less and less. Grenadians coming back and working in our health system. So it's looking at how and whether, you know, I mean, people in the past, when I was training, you trained to do medicine. It was a vocation. It wasn't about financial gains. It was about, you know, it was a vocation. You know, we know the police, the fire service, teaching, medicine, they're vocations. And the mindset has changed, definitely. Whether it's seen quite as a vocation like it used to be, I'm not sure. But with changing times and changing attitudes, systems have to change in order to attract people to come back and work in Grenada. There has to be a form of promotions. There have to be, you know, equipment and resources. It's not easy working in a health system if you don't have the resources, because then, you know, people can become frustrated, and it's not the quality of the doctors, it's not the quality of the nurses, but it's hard, you know, and it can be difficult emotionally for the staff to be happy all the time and give that service. So I think it's a continuing look at how the financing and the, as I say, basic resources. You can sometimes want like the hip replacement, and it affects a small number of your population, but all the population need to be able to get basic blood tests if they're coming in for operations or coming in as diabetics or coming in or not. So I think it's just a continued look at how to man your resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know,
yes, go ahead. I don't want to cut your train of thought.
No, I was saying this concept with the Caribbean Cancer Portal and the sharing. No, obviously, cancer is a real issue in the Caribbean, but cancer services are hugely expensive. We don't have radiotherapy in Grenada. We have oncology drugs, but we don't have a vast array of them, and we don't have a huge amount of oncology specialists. The ones we have are, you know, they're swamped basically, and that also comes to pathologists, because you've got to be able to have your reporting. If you don't have accurate reporting, you're not going to pick up the right cancer. Very important. So, you know, looking at ways of sharing resources within the Caribbean and having some way of having, you know, maybe there are radiotherapies in one country, maybe there's, and it can be offered to different people with a reduced cost at the costs, and ministry to ministry, you know, memorandums of, you know, of agreement. So, I mean, hopefully that from these meetings that we're having. So yes, we're working on things from that aspect. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Noel, this is such a very important conversation, very critical, especially given, again, you know, in recent vintage, you know, we have had a spate of premature deaths in Grenada. We're talking about people who are artists, entrepreneurs, you know, people in the education, in the service of education, people in healthcare. You know, it runs the gamut. And, you know, whenever you lose someone so young with so much potential, it does redound to the economic impact and the socioeconomic and cultural impact of the country. And so Grenada has been reeling in that respect, and which makes me wonder, you know, one of the indicators you think about when you think of for national country indicators is life expectancy, right? And so I'm very curious what the statisticians are saying now with respect to Grenada's life expectancy. You know, I'm not sure if that's something that the Commission has on its radar with respect to data collection, but I would be very curious to know whether or not that is a metric that's part of what you do that informs your policy or the advice that you're giving to government, really, on those things.
Yeah, I mean, we work closely with the statisticians in the Ministry of Health and look at their statistics. And I mean, one of the things, that's another area, you see manpower in that area
Yeah.
I know that they're looking to increase, and obviously registries as well. You may collect the data, but then you have to have the data in a format that you can actually use, So I know at the moment they're setting up a cancer registry at the ministry, and hopefully by early next year that will be in a situation to be rolled out. Now that's a huge step forward, because data is so important to advise on policy. So to get a proper cancer registry will be huge. And then moving on from that, using the IT services and the platforms that will be used, it will be to then collaborate NCD data from different aspects into a more usable format. And part of that will obviously be mortality figures. So the idea is, and I know that's what they're pushing for in the Ministry of Health, is to gradually increase data collection so it can be used much more to inform on policy. So yeah, from that point of view. So we are involved. We are getting involved in that.
Very well, very well.
Yeah.
Dr. Noel, any final comments from you before we get to the next segment?
No, really. I think one of the important things is to be aware that these diseases are out there. I think individuals, don't bury your heads in the sand. Screening, we didn't even really touch much on screening, but screening is so important, and there is screening services available in Grenada. So making the effort to educate yourself, have your yearly health check. If you're worried about something, don't leave it and think it will go away. A lot of illnesses and disease, even cancer, if it's picked up in a very early stage, it is treatable. A lot of cancer is treatable these days. So it's often, and you wonder whether some of the young people who have sadly left us, sadly died, whether if they had had more screening or more annual checkups, something would have been picked up earlier, and you wouldn't have these sudden deaths. So I mean, that definitely, people get your screening, and we can always come on again and talk a little bit more on screening that's available, and the screening that is so important for people. Yeah.
And they say early detection saves lives, and that is absolutely critical. I'm sure one of the concerns that people might have is, again, the cost of these services, right? And I hear that all the time. It's like a catch-22 situation. Well, I know I need to get screenings for this, or I know I need to check for this, but I have to make an economic decision. Do I feed my family, or do I take the resources to go and screen? So that is another issue there, which is why things like national health insurance is so critical. It's so critical, to have access to those services, so that
simple
the cost,
services,
so that the cost is reduced for those things. But Dr. Noel, thank you so much for appearing on the Bub Report this week.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and hopefully people can take away something for their health, and just, you have to look after yourself. I think that's it. You have to be responsible, look after yourself, and look after your family. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, of course, a very, very important conversation that we just had there with Dr. Jane Noel, who is the current chair of the Grenada National Chronic Non-Communicable Disease Commission. And of course, the work of the commission, again, and there are several coalition partners there. Dr. Noel mentioned the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council and other partners in Grenada, looking at the state of non-communicable diseases in Grenada, which leads to those very obvious outcomes, like, sadly, the premature deaths we are seeing. And the work of the commission, of course, is advisory. They advise government around policy. We also know that Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell is part of a delegation that held a high-level meeting in the United Nations, looking at the state of NCDs and what that would look like for the country. So, folks, what we'll do now is to take a quick break and come back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by for that.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9400 9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. We're happy that you can stay with us. Of course, this is the second segment of the program. And of course, for this segment, we will be having a conversation. If I can just adjust my audio there quickly. We will be having a conversation about the state of the Grenadian economy post-burial, and in the lead up to the reading of the 2026 estimates of revenue and expenditure announced by Grenada's Finance Minister, the Honorable Dennis Cornwall, for December 1st, 2025. Also, in the press conference held by the Minister of Finance, he also announced the sale of the EC $5 million household bond aimed at individual citizens, with the auction scheduled for October of 2025. The government also raised 15 million EC dollars through an oversubscribed 91-day Treasury bill auction in early September. Now, the new bond is part of a citizen investment strategy and is not primarily intended for government financing. Instead, it seeks to empower ordinary citizens and promote financial literacy by providing a safe investment opportunity. Now, who are the target investors? This bond is designed specifically for households and families, and not for large financial institutions such as banks and credit unions. Of course, the auction date, the sale is planned to begin in October of this year. Now, this is also happening against the backdrop of a recent electricity price hike by Grenlec. The fuel adjustment clause adjusts the fuel charge for up or down to remove any difference between what Grenlec paid for fuel and the amount that customers are billed through the fuel charge for the prior month. The FAC, effective the September 8th, it's at a rate of 0.12420, and it will be applied to usage in the previous billing period, while the fuel charge, effective the 8th of September, will be EC $0.5074 per kilowatt hour or unit calculated monthly. Of course, moreover, there are other geopolitical tensions in the Caribbean's backyard that has been sending some jitters throughout the region, as well as the impending fisheries export ban to the United States from Grenada. And of course, this week, we will get a private sector view of these and other economic developments affecting Grenada and its development. I'm happy to be joined by the private sector representative in the Senate, Senator Salim Rahman, as well as his immediate predecessor, the now retired Mr. Christopher Dialli, former Senator Christopher Dialli. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report. But former Senator Dialli, I want to begin with you, sir.
Sure.
Congratulations on your retirement. And how is retirement treating you?
Well, it certainly is not at the stress levels I used to have before, so that is a good thing. I am getting a chance to do other things that I want to do at my pace.
And what are those other things? Is there a passion that you had? Or are you a fisherman?
Well, yes, doing my backyard gardening is one of them, and involving myself in mediations is something I love to do. So yes, those are some of the two things I'm doing.
Very well, very well. And I see young Dialli has gotten involved in frontline politics. Of course, I had a chance to speak with young Dialli at the Active Summit. And one of the things he said to me was that, he said, no, I am my own man. I follow my own path. So he did not attend our alma mater, PBC. And so, but your thoughts on young Dialli here, carving a path
Well,
of his own in politics.
you know,
Did
I
he have
have
a
never.
conversation with you on that?
Yes, he did. He did, and I did tell him that I don't support him getting involved in party politics because party politics could be brutal. But
Yes,
he's a young man, a young person going to so that is positive.
yes.
So I said to him, whatever support I can lend, I will lend it. But
Hmm.
you have to go in and find your way and see
Correct.
how that goes.
And carve his own path. And of course, your successor, Salim Rahman. How are you doing, sir?
I am fine, thank you. And how are you?
I'm doing well. It was a pleasure connecting with you there at the Active Summit that was held in Grenada earlier this year. It was always good seeing a lot of the guests who appear on the program in the flesh, if you will, in person. So
Good to see you back home.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. But gentlemen, we really want to get into this conversation about the state of the economy. But of course, we want to begin with the budget. Of course, the government of Grenada announced by way of the Minister of Finance that the budget will be read on the 1st of December. If I can begin with you, Senator Rahman, from a private sector view, representative of the private sector, what are your expectations for this year's budget, and what have you been hearing from the private sector with respect to what they hope to see in the budget?
Well, if I may, Dr. Bob,
Yes.
the small businesses, as we know, are the drivers of the economy. They create new jobs, they enter new sectors, and that's where new growth and expansion of the economy is really based.
Mhm.
The existing businesses that have been there from decades, they continue to do well as the economy grows. They project an over 4% increase for 2026 or growth in the economy. So that's a good thing. We have seen increases year upon year. But there are challenges that remain that the business community are faced with. And these challenges, some of them have become the norm, which is the fluctuation in freight on imported goods. Most of our businesses that trade import goods, and also now the additional restrictions on exportation of goods as it relates to the U.S. market. Some months ago, we had tariffs. Now we have this issue with parcels under the value of $800 going to the United States. So there are a lot of challenges, new challenges that were not there before. And so whilst the small businesses and medium-sized businesses are the larger part of our business sector in terms of the what they make up, we have to make sure that they are also more vulnerable than the bigger businesses that have more access to capital and have more access to labor and so on. So we have to make sure that these small businesses are protected. And that the government, what we want to see is to make sure, for example, small businesses need help in marketing. The online marketplace is a great place to diversify. You can reach almost anybody in the world through an online marketplace, online portal today. And there are people that want our local products, but there's a challenge. There has been a problem, and this is not a new problem, in terms of meeting demand, bridging the gap between demand and supply. So that is a challenge that, in speaking to some of small businesses this week, on Monday, I met with 3 businesses. I try to go around and to meet with businesses on their time, at their location, and to learn about, what are their current challenges. One particular challenge that many businesses face is skilled labor. One particular business, a printery, I met with them only this Monday. They were explaining to me that they had an employee 10 years ago that worked with them, and that employee left and went to work somewhere else outside of Grenada on cruise ships and so on. And were it not for that employee coming back, because he was tired of working abroad, coming back to Grenada and coming back to them, they would have to shut down certain parts of their business, because they just didn't have the time to train a skilled person with regard to them how to use their machines, their printing machines, their printing press, and so on. And they would have to shut down certain parts of their offering or their business. And that's how important skilled labor is. So these are some of the challenges, labor challenges that face businesses, skilled labor in particular. Also, the time it takes to train. And then it's not only about skills, but it's about structure. It's not only about skills, but structure and ethics. So, showing up on time, consistency at work, and not jumping from job to job to job, and so on. So these are some of the challenges in our market, because as the economy grows, you're going to have these problems. You're going to have these problems that come with scaling. Everybody is competing, and that's why you see Barbados has recently signed up with I think 4 other economies, St. Vincent being one of them, Belize another, and they have signed a free movement. And this is something that I've spoken about. I've heard Senator Diali before me speak about it. The free movement of people within CARICOM. And recently Barbados did that with these 4 countries. And I am assuming that Barbados did that because they too are growing and they need a supply of labor. And they need a supply of labor into their market. And so this is one of the reasons why they've entered into that agreement.
Are you hearing from small businesses pressures with respect to, I suppose, the cost of their overheads that might lead them to want to have employee attrition? Are you hearing any concerns around perhaps them having to lay off employees because of the state of inflation? Again, inflation it's just not going down anytime soon. I mean, and later we'll be talking about those geopolitical conditions even in our region. Are small businesses talking about that?
Not from inflation per se as yet, because most small businesses are family-run operations, and they're already small. They rely on family members that give part-time service, and many small businesses, the owners actually have a second job or another income source, and they're trying something on the side. But when it comes to the issue of getting material and getting supply and consistency of supply and so on, this is a challenge for them. So one thing is the price, the other is actually getting it in a timely manner.
Absolutely. Let me bring in former Senator Chris Diali here. Mr. Diali, what are you hearing in respect of the budget? I know that the government has been having budget consultations. I'm not too sure if you had an opportunity to offer any suggestions or feedback to the administration with respect to what to include in the budget. But what are you hoping to see coming out of the budget? Of course, we just heard Senator Rahman articulate, perhaps suggesting to government how they can support small businesses in particular, who are most vulnerable to these geopolitical and trading volatility that we're seeing. But what say you on that, sir?
Well, first of all, Karan, the issue of we having 2 budgets presented for this year, which is a good thing in that they're presenting the budget in early December, as indicated by the Minister of Finance, which is a good thing because it gives government enough time to debate and to pass it, because the budget needs the passing in Parliament in order for it to become legally effective. So from the 1st of January, most of the things can start, whereas last year it started in April because it was presented in March thereabouts. So they basically had 9 months. The other thing is, in my reading of the first budget, it was a deficit budget. We need to hear from the fiscal framework that is going to be presented, whether you were able to recover the deficit that we presented or not, and how that budget performed in terms of various things that they had projected. So that being said, I want to support Senator Rahman in some of the things he said. I think that one of the major challenges we're going to face and we need to see how the budget is going to address is the labor shortage across all sectors. Particularly hit is construction and agriculture. In the 4% growth that Salim spoke about, it is going to be led primarily by construction, boom, tourism, and of course, education services. So if we get a 4%, which is a good thing, but it's led by those three sectors which are struggling to get a human resource. There are recent announcement by government that they're looking to bring in, they didn't say skilled labor, but from the rate they're planning to pay the Cubans, it has to be skilled labor, which is going to be about 540 EC dollars a week. So you're talking about a $2,000 salary. So it has to be skilled labor. It can't just be normal labor. And that is a good thing from that point of view, because it is going to help the construction sector. And I hope it expanded to agriculture, because agriculture is in dire need of help from a human resource standpoint, but primarily human resource. So I agree that we have some work, and it will be good to see how the 2026 budget is going to approach some of these things. The inflation I'm concerned about, because, imported inflation is something we have very little control on. And with the policies enunciated by Trump 2.0 on tariffs, we are going to be hit. And in some supermarkets, they're already saying that they have projected by their suppliers that there's going to be as much as a 20% increase in prices, and how that is going to filter and deal with us in terms of affordability of buying basic stuff and so on. So there is going to be a challenge there, and how we deal with it in 2026 and the budget, and what is the relief that the government is proposing without affecting their revenues. Because I'm not sure if they want to present another deficit budget in terms of spending more than they're collecting. But, it is something to look out for and see how they're going to cater those things. And then we have fisheries. Fisheries has just hit a blow with this new thing by NOAA. And the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, Honorable Lennox Andrews, announced yesterday that he and his team were working assiduously to dealing with getting the necessary regulations and legal instruments in place before January 2026, and to go back for a review by NOAA, so that by January 2026, we should, or shortly thereafter, be released from the blacklist that is going to impose export conditions on our fish to the US. So that is a good thing. The hope is that it can be done in time, because St. Vincent is one of the few countries in the OECS that is given permission to hunt mammals. We don't. We just fish for tuna and other things, but I suppose in the catch, we do get them. So it's about new regulations, educating the fishermen, and passing legislation. So let us hope that they could get that done in time. And that would be my initial take on where we are with the budget. And it's going to be interesting when it presents on December the 1st to look out for those areas of challenges, or as we just say in the budget language, the risks, the downside risks and the upside risks that the government will have to face in order to make their budget presentation a reasonable one.
And let me bring back Senator Rahman. Senator Rahman, you articulated some of the challenges that especially small businesses, of course, and I think if we think about, and of course, I'm sure Mr. Dialli would agree with this, with respect to, the small businesses in Grenada, they really drive economic activity in the society, if you think about it, right? Are you looking for any specific fiscal support measures, whether that's a reduction in perhaps import duties that has been paid? We did have that in the past, or whether that's other support mechanisms that that might assist them in cushioning some of the impacts that we're seeing. I know you did mention labor and the lack of skilled labor, and that is a challenge that we discussed in a previous program here. But what specific measures are you hoping to see in the budget that would deal with those challenges?
You see, Dr. Bob, when you look at the income of government government earns a lot of the intake comes from the port.
Yes.
And they're very defensive over that income.
Yeah.
And so to ask for concessions, it takes time. It is not something that they give up easily. When several years ago, when they made the concessions on freight, the chamber made an application to the then government about more than a year before they actually gave the concession. That's how long. And within that time, the freight rate had tripled. And so the effects of inflation, by that time, the new government had come in, this current administration. They implemented it, but it was already on its way down. So it had limited, in other words, the hurt was already done. And that's the key. The key is timing. The key is to get it right. And oftentimes we find from the private sector, when we have to make decisions in the private sector, we have meetings, and right at the board level, we can make decisions and put them into practice almost next day, as soon as possible. But with government, you have to have the studies, you have to have all of the protocol followed, and when they do all these studies and papers and these experts, by that time, many times the opportunity is gone. So what we see is that there is increasing, and this is not unique to Grenada, all small island states will face this. There is inflation, and there is going to be the compounding effects of inflation. And to be honest with you, Dr. Bob, no government can really solve this problem. Because, look, I'll give you the example of the packages. You have, prior to September 1st, you had, September 1st, when it became in effect, you had countries can export their products, including Grenada, into the United States market. And if the value of it was under 800 US, they wouldn't have to do the customs entries. That has been changed. Now, I heard 4 weeks ago in a news report from CBS that it was moved down to 100. And today, in a conversation with our local postal corporation, I have heard that it is from $1. So it means that anything that's going into the US, you have to do your customs entry. You have to pay customs. There's duties applied and so on. So there's no free pass. But in addition to this, what they have done is turned the entire model upside down. So what they are asking now is for the supplier to pay the tariff and the duty before the goods gets to the US. Rather than, it is the norm that when you import a good, you pay, the importer pays the duty. Now they want the exporter or the supplier to pay those duties upfront. And so that's why you have such a pause, because there's no system that can do that. And the people that have to take the responsibility, the legal responsibility to do so, are the freight companies or the broker. And so that's why they now have to, to find a broker, and I believe there are only two in the United States that are prepared to do this, and to find the brokerage system, or for companies like DHL and the other companies that are shipping out to take that responsibility to pay the duties upfront. Of course, they have communicated to their people that the tariffs are a good thing, and that the other people will be paying the tariffs. And the reality is that the consumer is the one who pays the tariffs, right? That's the reality. So, but by switching it around, it seems, and it looks like the supplier is paying it, of course, but the end customer pays it. So these are some of the challenges now. So I spoke to a small business person today, and I asked them, I said, how are you dealing with this? how are you dealing with this? Because the Postal Corporation is working on a solution, and I've inquired whether bigger economies. This didn't only affect Grenada. Europe did the same thing. India did the same thing. Germany did the same thing. France. They all suspended the shipments until they can find a solution to deal with it. So while they are working on it, we have small businesses. What are they doing? This small business person told me today that they have actually started shipping within the Caribbean. So they have pivoted, and they are now finding markets because there are countries like Antigua and Barbados that they don't have all of the agri products that we have. And so they want it. And so they have been shipping there instead. So, as the old people say, when one door closes, another one opens. And in addition to that, the Grenadians, because they have now some of them, in this particular case, this business has their presence online. So people will make orders and make arrangements. So when they fly down, they will buy whatever they need to buy and take it back to the US. So that's how they are circumventing in a legal way that. So to ask, how can government put policies in place to make that easier for business people? There are some things that government really cannot do. There's only so much they could do. What government could do is to help small and medium businesses get online. And I think GIDC can work with the GCIC, with the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, to help to develop portals or websites, so they can use their websites. So every businessman doesn't have to, every small business don't have to do it themselves. And government can help to fund that, to train them. Also, how a small business can use AI. So you can have your personal assistant. You can help with your marketing of your product online by using AI, and you can also help in terms of your customer database and the reminders and so on, when to reorder, when to get back in touch with this customer so that they can use the technologies. I think government can help the small businesses in the budget by funding some of these training to help small businesses use these tech tools to scale.
Let me, Mr. Diali, is that a perspective you agree with in
Well,
respect of providing that technical support against the backdrop of these volatile trade issues we're seeing with the United States? Every day it's something. That post office one, of course,
I
is just one of those. But yes,
I
go
do
ahead.
believe the government has instruments that it can use. I'll give an example with a
Yes.
small business. Small business in particular has an increase in labor because of the minimum wage. So that's a major increase for them, where they were paying, and now the minimum wage law requires them to pay an increase. So that is one. We can't do anything about it. It's law, and that is what it is. And I am not about to say that people are not deserving of what the proposed law have said. But one of the things that I agree with Senator Rahman, I don't think we need to look for concessions from government for small business. What I want to suggest is that we look for markets using AI and the technology that is suggested outside of the US market. We have a South American market. We have Guyana, we have Suriname. We could get GIDC to help our small businesses partner with suppliers in those markets. For example, I had an interview with a young man 2 weeks ago that does dark chocolate. He does an excellent dark chocolate with all kind of infused tastes like mango and nuts and all kind of thing. And it's excellent. I tasted them, and it's a lovely product. But he will have a capacity issue if he moves to widen his market outside of the local market. He will need assistance to build capacity, and here we look for government to give him concessions, not probably the best word, but to give him some facilitation on that GDP and the loan portfolio they offer to small business at really reduced interest rates, and help advise them as to how they could build capacity so that they could build market share and increase. So that is one area we could use to help the small businessman in terms of dealing with his businesses. And I always want to say, Keran, we need to stop this conversation of, we bring in the Chinese, we bring in whoever to come to Grenada and say, listen, I want a container dasheen from you. We can't do a container dasheen in 6 months. We can't do it per month. It's taking us 9 months to do a container. We need to do it differently. If I have a product in Grenada that I think your market is going to like, and I used to use nutmeg as an example, go to India, find a partner. They have greater capacity, they have less cost of production, your trademark, your licenses, and so on, and you let them produce in India. India have a potentially $1 billion market, billion people to service. You may not get a billion, you may get 200 million, and that alone could give you royalties that will move your business to a serious level where you, from an export point of view, you don't have to ship a container, but what you're shipping is the knowledge and you're protecting it so you can get your royalties. So we had to change the conversation for the small businessman as well, and to let them know small family-run businesses at $100,000 a year could multiply to 100 million if you get the right partner and you do the right protection. So that is one area I think we need to push for small business. And on the cost of inflation, I want to suggest something here to you, Salim, that government could consider. Government operates its revenue on a thing called revenue neutrality. In other words, if we give up something, we must find something, whether it's tax or
Replace it.
other, to keep the revenue neutral. So because their bills are constant in terms of what they have to pay. I want to suggest our VAT is at 15%. We may want to consider moving VAT to 17% because most of the other islands in the OECS are higher than Grenada. But in doing that, we expand the list for food items, particularly basic food items that will attract inflation, and we expand the exempt list. And of course, crunch the figures to see how it will offset. But I think that is something that would help the ordinary man to deal with the basic food items with the cost of inflation increases we expect by using the VAT as an instrument. So if you go by 2%, you get the additional revenue to create a revenue neutrality. If you expand the exemption list for basic food items and you add a few others, it may help in that situation. So it will help ease the cost. So those are things I think we can use. We can't just put up your hand and say we can't do nothing. There are instruments we could use, but we need to be creative and explain to the people why it is we see. Kellan mentioned the thing about Grenlec and the increase in rates. And in some people, that will be significant. Your bill may move from $500 a month to $700 and $800 based on the increase and the kilowatt burns. No, government have concession on PV. And what is happening with PV? Is there something we can do to help all building permits that are coming through the PPA that will insist that all people go to the bank for their mortgages to have solar for heating and PV panels, not for the entire house, but to give you at least a 60% break on your utility bill, which will help in terms of the cost of living. And have some kind of program where we could offer that cost to put in a PV system at a reasonable cost subsidized by government. So I am saying there are creative ways we could look at things to help, but it will be interesting to see how the budget goes about it. I'm just throwing all those ideas there for consideration.
So
Senator, just if you want to piggyback, please. Yes.
yeah, the PV. I'm not so sure about the PV because the PV. I mean, it's a good suggestion, but it puts more PV systems that you do. It's more intensive on the grid. Especially as we're going with more and more electric cars and so on, the grid is taking more load, and so it means they will have to upgrade the grid for the additional load, and it will be at additional cost to Grenlec. But the idea is a very good one because it's.
Well, we're going to do a 2 megawatt farm in the airport.
Yes,
and that
absolutely.
has to go back on the grid. So
Yeah.
the grid is being considered for upgrade now.
They have to.
So
they
I'm
have to
saying
upgrade it,
that
and
we
they will
need
be-
to look at it holistically and phase it if necessary. Because an ordinary household of 2-3 bedrooms without AC units and general lighting is a small PV system. The
Yeah.
PV system might be less than
a 5
$60,000 based on
kilowatt
panels.
system. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 and
So
5 kilowatt system.
it's exactly. So it shouldn't be something that the grid can't take in its and
I mean,
again, Glenn could face it.
There are
Yes.
already
Senator?
concessions on these systems.
That's
There are
right. And I said so, yeah.
concessions on these systems.
But we need
And
to get it now for people to put it as part of their project when they're doing a new project.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It should be pushed because it will ease the amount of generation that government has to do,
That's
that
right.
government has to pay for. And since our generation is diesel generation, you use all the alternative technologies you can, and solar is a cheap one as compared to wind, for example. And so it
And
definitely,
geothermal.
and geothermal. The geothermal is probably it is the most expensive of the three. And so we definitely need to piggyback and use that more. So I definitely agree with him. The VAT aspect, businesses collect more. If you raise the VAT to 17%, businesses will collect more for government. That may lead to some changes in pricing. I'm not sure how the business community will accept that, but what Senator Diali is saying is that will create some extra revenue for government, by which government can then shift to to give more to the vulnerable, and that's a good thing. I'm not sure, that would have to be discussed if I'm going to recommend that. But that other economies have done that, and they have gone that way. And you could look at the VAT rate of the
That's right.
UK.
Barbados has a recent one. Barbados is
Yes,
more than 17%.
yes, and the UK, I believe, is 20%.
Correct.
So that's the general direction that they're going to have to go in anyway, right? Because other economies have done it. It's just a matter of time. Of course, the business community has to be consulted. We get their opinions. I represent them, but at the same time, this is what we have seen that economies in the region and larger economies have gone to, in order to meet their expenses. So it's just a matter of time.
Yes, go ahead, Senator. Yes.
With regard to fuel and Grenlec, as I mentioned to you, there's government is just basically reflecting, or Grenlec is reflecting the price increase and passing that on. It is a government decision, a political decision, you might want to say. They've used it in the past. They have applied certain patches, certain relief measures, and we now today news article I read that the leader of the opposition is calling on government to do something there. And that's the nature of politics. One side is pushing for relief, and that's the nature of politics, to keep the government in power, in check. But whether government and when government, if they will do it, my thinking is that the market, the market forces are the market forces, and things are going to change. To expect things to remain the same, you have to understand that the world we live in today changes a constant. You're going to have changes. Government needs to see how these changes affect the consumer, and then government needs to make sure they can give certain relief to the consumer where it is needed the most. Electricity is very, very important to business. We're already at a disadvantage in the region in terms of our electrical cost per kilowatt. So that's an area that, it affects the business sector. It will affect the small business even more. It is significant cost of our operations, especially for manufacturers and so on. And it is something that when we see how it is affecting the business, I'm sure we will get feedback on that, and we will have to approach government. It may change, and the rate may change. And we just heard recently in President Trump's speech at the UN that fuel rates have gone down. And so if fuel rates have gone down or is going down, then perhaps they may not need to make an adjustment or relief effort. But if it's not and it continues to climb, of course they're going to have to address it.
Yes, but you're saying that they will have to address it. Yes, but should they not have extended the incentive that was already in place? That is Grenlec now.
Well, of course, Grenlec made a decision, right?
Yeah.
They already made a decision and they publicized their decision. Should
correct.
they have done it? In my
But yeah, yes, in your opinion, should they have done it?
in my opinion, yes. If they can afford to do so, they should do so, because electricity is so key to every aspect of the economy. Electricity and labor, these things are fixed costs, and there's not much that a business can do right away to offset these things. Yes, Grenlec mentioned in their release that be careful of your usage. Take certain measures not to waste electricity. But there's only so much you can do. If you have to run your equipment, you have to run your equipment. If you're a manufacturer and you have to run your equipment, you have to run it. You can't shut down your. If you are a fisher, or you're in that business of exporting fish, as we're on that topic, you have to have your freezers running. Your bait has to be frozen. You can't switch off the lights in your warehouse. There's only so much you can do. You can invest in a system, a PV system, that takes months to install. So could they do they have to give all of the concessions as they were given? Perhaps not. But market forces are what they are, but they should ease it. That is my opinion. They should ease it.
Mr. Diallo, do you agree with that view?
You have to be able to afford it.
Yes.
Well, Grenlec calculation for increased rates is done in a delay. So it's a 3-month average that they calculate and watch at the fuel prices over that period, and then they announce that the trend has been an increase for the last 3 months. They can't afford to pay and not recover.
Yeah.
Because cash flow is going to be a key thing for them with fuel. When they go to the fuel company to buy diesel, they can't say, I owe you for 6 months. I have to pay right away. So they have to recover as quickly as possible to protect their cash flow. So I hear what it is, but Grenlec normally looks at this on a 3-month rotating cycle and look at the trend. If Mr. Trump say price coming down, we let to see what the international market is going to see, what Brent crude is going to trade at and how it's going to affect us. And even then, the effect is delayed. We may see prices adjusting downward after 3 months as well. So it is something that is constantly being watched. And I agree that Grenlec needs to recover. You could tell the consumer what to consume and how to consume, and wastage. You could have them install, LED lights and the lighting and all of that. But it's not something, as Salim says, you can't ask a manufacturer to shut down his machine. And when the price increase comes, it's immediate. And you have to deal with the fallout of that. So your bill will move from $500 approximately a month and may go to $700, $800. You have an extra $200. Could you pass that on to your consumer? You probably can't, because you're in a competitive market, so your profit margins have to absorb it. So there are multiple implications, and I'm not sure that government, in a more medium-term strategy, as I suggested, encourage PV, but in the immediate sense, we probably need to keep looking at the prices and see how we could, we could do what we could do in our own internal operations to save.
Yeah, it's all about those savings there, and being very prudent with your energy use as they articulated. But of course, that certainly has an impact on those fixed costs that comes with operating a business. But
even perhaps, Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob, as we are on PV, if we see a continued increase or spike in fuel prices, wouldn't it make sense for government through GDB to offer loans at concessionary rates to small businesses to help them to afford PV systems? I mean, we're speaking about an increase on different fronts for small businesses. And of course, the small business has to do what they can to minimize their electrical overheads and so on. But as I mentioned, there's only so much you could do. But a program, or in the same way that you give concessions to farmers, you can give concessions to micro and small businesses for the same PV systems to help them to absorb some of the electrical. So the bigger businesses, that have overdraft facilities and have access to more capital and can take a little more licks, as we say, they could probably ride the wave. But smaller businesses, they could be pushed out of the market if this is something that the trend continues. I think before budget is ready, they could look at something like that and make some funds available at a lower rate for micro and small businesses to help to cushion that effect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, gentlemen, we are going to move on to the next topic here, and that has to do with the fisheries ban, the pending fisheries export ban to the United States. Now, that is a story we here at the Bub Report has been following from the outset. Of course, notwithstanding that Grenada and other Caribbean countries are using this opportunity to pivot away from the global north with respect to finding our trading partners in the global south, specifically on the African continent. The United States still remain one of our most significant trading partners for Grenada and for a number of countries in the Caribbean. Now, in following this, export ban, it was quite shocking, really, just to see the level of sheer incompetence on the part of the administrative state in respect to just putting particular regulations in place that they did not put in place, right? With respect to looking at the legislation, with respect to responding to the feedback. I mean, I looked at the NOAA Marine Service report, and I was really shocked at the level of sheer incompetence on our part. So while the volatility that we're seeing coming from the U.S., part of this is squarely laid at the feet of our administrators in Grenada, and there is absolutely no excuse from this. So, Mr. Diali, I want to begin with you on that ban and how that is going to be affecting not only the fishermen, but we're looking at the ripple economic impacts it's going to have, even though it may be a short-term impact. Now, NOAA may say, well, I will return your proposal with counter proposal. They may have to submit more information. There is no guarantee that NOAA would say, okay, you're now approved for export. We don't know how long that's going to take, given the volatility that exists. So let's talk about it.
Well, Karen, I certainly agree with you. The incompetence on our side is amazing, and we have to bear the responsibility for what the position we are in now. You
Yes.
can't respond to NOAA and say you don't have staff in place and you're working on staff. No, that is just not unacceptable. That's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
Understanding the importance of the fisheries industry. No, we have St. Vincent, our neighbor, who have been in negotiations with NOAA for mammals, for hunting and whales, and they put in regulations. They made adjustments to the legislation. So it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
We have a neighbor right next door where we could say, guys, let us consult and see how you did, what you did, how you did education for the fisher folk, and so on, so we could get this done quickly and put in place and pass in Parliament as quick as possible. No, Parliament have now come back, and the major thing going forward will be the budget debate. So even though we have to pass legislation, it may be delayed in the first quarter of next year unless the government intends to push it through quickly with the budget debate and what is happening there if the changes are not major. So it gives them a timeline that they may not meet for January 2026, but they could have communications with NOAA, send them drafts and let them know this is what is happening, and ask for their consideration and through negotiation to ease the ban from January. So that is a possibility as well. So we have a lot of work to do in order to get this done. But there is also another issue that is coming up, Kellan, that we need to talk about. Fishermen now are worried going out there and fish because you have to go further out now to get a good tuna because of the military tensions that's building up in the Caribbean Sea, both from the south side and from Grenada and what is happening with Caribou and the US and what they're doing with their battleships and other things, other military assets in the area, and listening to the rhetoric from Venezuela and so on. The fisher folk from Trinidad, from Suriname, from Grenada and St. Vincent are now, intimidated to go out certain distances because they're not certain what will happen. They hear in the US blow up a boat, 11 people dead, they don't hear no reason why. They say it's possibly narco drugs, but we don't have no proof or anything. So there is a element of fear now as to what you can do and how you can do it. So getting this matter resolved on the NOAA end in terms of regulations and legislation is critical, but we also have this tension building up in the Caribbean that is not helping either.
And you actually preempted that, and we'll be talking about that shortly, because again, but we'll get to that. But Senator Rahman, on the question of the fisheries export ban, what do we do in the interim? Because there may be a glut. Well, there will be a glut in the market, really.
So
For fisher folk. So
Before
what happens?
Senator Aaron, let me
Yes,
just say one
yes,
thing.
yes, Mr.
As
Diallo. Yes, sir.
Salim, I think the next time you go in Parliament, please ask them to put in a canning facility for processing of our fish. So even though we have a glut, we can can it and sell canned tuna or something. We tired get jetty and freezer for ice and so on. We want a processing facility behind one of those facilities where we dock and we store fish and we freeze and so on. We want a processing facility to accompany one of those things. We could get it from Japan, we could get it from anywhere, from South American countries as well. So why not? We tired not do we own thing. Let us get a processing aspect to the fishing.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Yes, Senator Rahman. Go ahead, sir.
So yeah, a few things, Dr. Bob.
Yes.
The government has to own this, and I think they have realized that.
Yes.
It is squarely at their feet. They have dropped the ball, so to speak, and this is not a politics issue.
No, it's not.
This is a national issue, and
Correct.
this is very, very, very important to the private sector, to agriculture, to government, to all of us as Grenadians. We want to see a solution to this, and we want to see this ASAP. Of course, there are guidelines that NOAA has set forth, and the minister is quoted as saying that the letter makes room for negotiation. And that being the case, I am hopeful. This is not something that should be brought to Parliament next year. This is something that should be brought to Parliament before the budget. It's that important. But there is work to be done. So I'm aware that on the 5th, I think government learned of this by the 2nd or 3rd of September. And by the 5th, there was a meeting and there was a task force set up. And that task force received instructions from Cabinet, from my understanding, the Monday when Cabinet met. And they are looking at the legislation and at certain regulations and so on that need to be implemented, and they have to do so it's at legal affairs, and they have to do their tweaks and whatever they need to do, and have some back and forth communication with the entity, so that by the 1st of January, according to the website, NOAA's website, when they have the opportunity to apply, they will be ready. They will have already done all of the prerequisite work, passed all of the legislation that needs to be passed to satisfy them, and they will be ready to go. So if there is a delay, it shouldn't be long. And even if, as the minister said, there is room for negotiation, all of that should be taking place as soon as possible. So I'm aware that because I did reach out, and I'm aware that government is taking this. They understand that this was a lapse, and they are treating it very seriously at the highest levels, and that task force has competent people assigned to it for more than one ministry, and they just need to get it to Parliament as soon as possible, so that we can get this thing passed, so we could be up to speed. We don't want the business sector, whether it's agriculture, whether it's any politician. No, it's not in anybody's interest for this to hurt the fishing sector. So we need to do what we have to do. We have to understand they have understood their role, their responsibility. It stands squarely at their feet, and I think that they are doing what they can do, because they have had 3 rounds of communication with the fishers since this, and we're still in September. That is good progress in terms of consultation with the people in the industry.
So, but what happens in the interim, Senator Rahman, with respect to just the fishermen and the impact that that will have? Of course, you know, these fishermen, they have mortgages. A lot of the proceeds from those exports obviously goes towards funding their mortgages for their boats and their supplies and things like that. Shouldn't there be sort of perhaps a special fund, an emergency fund for fishermen who will be affected by this in the interim by government? Perhaps assisting them. Mr. Diali just articulated here, finding alternate markets for other products in India and things like that. But looking at just support for them, perhaps in the budget, in case that, you know, this NOAA process, because we know how the bureaucracy of government works. We cannot assume that it's going to be an open and shut case, Senator.
I think we're in September.
But my understanding, though, is that they could still export. The ban starts in January.
Yeah, it does not come until January. And my thinking is
first. Yeah,
correct. My thinking is post January 1st. Yes.
In the interim, we strategically get other markets and look at fish processing. I think that is on the short to medium. But as Salim say, if everything comes in being, then they could probably get a lifting in January. But they could export right now. In the interim, they could export.
In the interim, correct. Senator Rahman, sorry, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that the minister has announced that the budget will be read in early December.
Yes.
It means that they can measure the task force progress and the progress. They can measure it in the month of October. They have this month and they have next month to measure, in my opinion. They can measure, and based on the progress and the minister's comments that there's room for negotiation, they would have an understanding by the end of October what they need to do, what they're looking at, whether this thing will be protracted or whether it will be able to be solved in short order. With regard to Senator Diali's, and of course I refer to him as Senator Diali because he served so many years in that position that, you know.
I also do the same sometimes.
Once a senator, always a senator.
Always a senator, yes.
Even though he's retired, so maybe I could put retired senator.
Retired senator, yes.
I still prefer to use the title. So with regard to his comment about canning, I spoke to one. Look, we import a lot of bait. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of bait is imported for the fishing sector because they also sell bait to the fishermen, and that's imported. So even before you go to canning, there's much less processing for bait. In my opinion, we really need to think about why are we importing so much bait, and if we could cut down on those on the import of bait, because you have all of your spillover products that you could use, fish products that you could use for bait before you could even go to canning, because canning requires a certain level of investment, certain quality of product, and so on, and training. So I think that's a first step that we could look at immediately. With regard to other markets, now the U.S. market is, quote unquote, the market. What I mean by that is in terms of price, right? It gives you get the best price. You have consumption of 300 million plus people. It is right there. There are supply chains that are established, going every week, and so it is, quote unquote, regular business, easy business. Now, that's not to say that we don't need to look at other opportunities. I mean, you talking about diversification and you're talking about strengthening and protecting your industry, right? From my standpoint, in my automotive industry, I don't have one supplier. I would not put myself in the position to have only one supplier. And I don't have one brand, right? And I don't purchase from one country. I have supplies from different brands, different suppliers in different countries. So if there's a war, there's a trade restriction, there are shipping route changes, I can pivot. All right, and this is something that we started to do in the 90s, in 1994, when in my father's time. I mean, we speak about some of the Grenadian businessmen and their foresight, right? But the industry needs to do the same thing, but it's not something that's done overnight. You can't just switch and pivot and find new suppliers and find new markets overnight. It's a process. So right now we are committed to this issue, and we need to make sure we solve this problem. And going forward, we can see what other markets is well within our right to see what markets there are out there and what other markets we can tap into.
I think I'm muted there, but I think Mr. Diallo, you wanted to add something. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just saying that in terms of the fishing, the type of fishing we do is long line fishing for the tuna and so on. We don't do much net fishing, and that's where the bait comes in. So
That's right.
some of our fishermen will probably need to pivot to do some net fishing to get bait and sell and be consistent to that. So there may be some pivot in there as well. So I just
Yes.
want to put that in.
Yes,
Is
and absolutely, absolutely, and that's an easy pivot. It's not so hard, right? Because the smaller fish you get closer to shore, and
yeah, yeah.
the other aspect is from what I understand from the industry, they have to plan 6 and 8 months ahead. So they have to order bait 6 and 8 months ahead. That's a lot of money being put forward to get it to our shores, to get it into their storerooms, right? And so that's something that is definitely worth looking into to see how we could show up that aspect of the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, gentlemen, such important conversations. Now, two final issues here. And of course, Mr. Diallo, you alluded to it earlier, and that has to do with the geopolitical tensions. Of course, we saw what the geopolitical tensions in Russia, Ukraine did to global supply chain and what it did to inflation, really. But now these geopolitical tensions are coming close to home in our backyard, if you will. Maurice Bishop famously said in nobody's backyard, but unfortunately, it's now in our backyard. You alluded to the fear that fishermen now have with these extra judicial executions in international waters without any care for due process or without any care for verification of the claims that the U.S. puts on the table that says that these are drug boats. Well, you have not provided any evidence to say that. But fundamentally, let us talk about, and Mr. Diallo, I'll start with you, these geopolitical tensions and the jitters it may cause for the economies of the region, especially the Southern Caribbean.
Well, Kelon, it is unfortunate that we have that developing. And when you see what Mr. Trump have done in terms of using his military to increase, the U.S. have always been in our region for drug interdiction. It is nothing new. They have a lot of Coast Guard cutters that are in
And
the
we have
region.
the Southern Command, I believe, is what it's
Correct,
called, the U.S.
correct.
Southern
And
Command.
they
Yes.
are all in contact with our local police authority. We have radars set up and so on. So it's nothing new for the drug interdiction. But this buildup says to me something different because in the background of this is the Venezuela situation with the Guyana situation. And to me, it's all about oil and who gets control of the oil. And the U.S. is here to let and to position and let them know that they are willing to intervene where necessary to do whatever is necessary. Support Guyana if there is a invasion on the border with Venezuela, and the Russians and the Chinese are behind the Venezuelans. So it is big powers playing games in my humble opinion, to get control of that asset of oil in the region. And Mr. Trump has said and used the drug interdiction as the excuse to do the buildup. But what he's not saying and nobody's indicating is if the buildup will end and when. You have six warships deployed with a nuclear powered sub, and they're in the region. We have never had that level of activity, and nobody seemed to want to say, okay, we believe the drug interdiction is now under control. We have instilled the fear of God through Mr. Trump, if that is a harmonious thing, and see if at all that will ease, because they are saying Venezuela is the main perpetrator of the narco drugs, the narco thing, economy of Venezuela. Again, without no proof and what is happening. So you see that, to me, in my humble way of thinking, that is the excuse to come into the region and to say to guys, listen, we're watching carefully and we will be here to level an interdiction where we think is necessary. What that does for us in the southern region economically and otherwise, it shows us into a tailspin. Because remember, a lot of our trade comes from Guyana, comes from Trinidad. We have the weekly movement of boats from Trinidad to Grenada, bringing up all sorts of stuff. And we do have trade coming through the South American continent from various businesses in reduced amounts, but it's increasing. So with that kind of tensions in the region, it's going to affect us significantly. Freight costs is going to go up with the tensions. If the tensions continue to increase, here again, we see another challenge coming. And it's something that we have to pay close attention to and to see what is going to happen.
Yeah, and Senator, I'll bring you in here. And Mr. Diali referenced it earlier. And really that has to do with, again, the pressures that the fishermen would confront. Because, again, as I said, these are extrajudicial, subjective military aggression that's going after fishermen, fishing boats. And you expect us to believe your version of the story without allowing us to verify the accuracy or lack thereof in your telling of the story. So, Mr. Rahman, Senator, is that something that private sector at a regional level now, not only Grenada, but at a regional level, is private sector is having conversation, for example, with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, because she's one of those that has been a trailleader in this, really, as well.
Correct, yeah. Dr. Bob, this is something that is of concern and ought to be of concern to all people within the region. We and our leaders have made it clear that we are a zone of peace and we want to continue to be a zone of peace. We are not a threat to anyone, and we have had an excellent relationship with our neighbors to the north, well, the United States, Canada, and so on. We've had an excellent relationship with the north over the years. We host their students, and they have had excellent treatment from us as a people, and they continue to do so. To bring these types of heavy military equipment in our region is disturbing. And I think that it requires a response from all of our leaders in CARICOM. I don't know that I've heard a message from CARICOM on this matter. And if there has been a message, then it hasn't been shared by the media widely. But we definitely need to hear a message that, look, we don't want this, because war has a way and conflict has a way of spilling over and spreading and having untold effects in areas that we cannot even plan or imagine, destabilizing the neighbors. So it is not just a Venezuela thing, right? It's not just a Guyana thing. Guyana is part of CARICOM, right? Of course, we want to protect the integrity of our Guyanese brothers and sisters, right? And the US has a vested interest there. The petroleum companies and so on are heavily invested there, right? So they have their interests to protect and so on. But we also believe in the rule of law and the rule of international law, and that everybody should follow it, because they are big players. And we have seen when big players have proxy wars in other territories, in other parts of the world, what happens to those countries? This is not something that we want in our part of the region. Our part of the region is where Europe and North America comes on vacation. They come on vacation. We have been welcoming them for decades. Our economies are built around serving them. The greatest drivers of our economies are tourism. Is tourism. And so we have a lot at stake, and we have a right to speak on the issue. We don't want, for whatever reason that there is, we don't want this buildup in our region. If you have an issue with drugs, narcotics, you have a right to police those things at or around your borders, right? And so we speak about international law, and we speak about respect for sovereignty and so on. We hear often about democracy and the nations that promote democracy. Well, the people of a country have a right to choose their leadership and to remove their leadership through a democratic process, through a legal process. And so it is disturbing to see what we have seen in other parts of the world, that sort of build-up coming to our peaceful Caribbean shores. It is very disturbing, and I think that, the leaders of the Caribbean, the CARICOM as a whole, should send a clear message that we are a zone of peace. We have always been a zone of peace. We want to remain a zone of peace. I mean, let me tell you, if we have to use fishing boats to block entry, if whatever we have to do in a peaceful manner to resist, when you look at what Dr. Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi and the likes of those had to do in terms of peaceful resistance, even if it comes to that, we have to peacefully resist. We don't want any sort of conflicts near us or in our region.
Well, I think the Prime Minister of Trinidad will disagree with you, given her bellicose rhetoric in all of this. But by saying, I think I'm not going to say what she said verbatim, but something to the effect of "honor life them all," right? Her rhetoric in this. So the reason why I'm saying this is because you're calling for CARICOM to have a joint statement. But Grenada released a statement through its Prime Minister. But so far, it's been very piecemeal, and I don't know where Trinidad and Guyana would stand on calling for this business of zone of peace when they seem to be supporting this military buildup.
Yeah, I agree with that. And CARICOM is hesitant because two of the main players, Trinidad and Guyana, probably won't sign on to a position taken by CARICOM.
Yeah.
And that has delayed CARICOM's response. But Salam is correct. If we were to take into consideration what is happening in tourism and so on, it would be amazing to see if we get any jets bringing in tourists, which we have fighter jets flying over the area.
Yeah.
So,
And
it's really a significant and serious thing that we have to consider, and
you
CARICOM
can't
needs to address it.
you can't
yes,
plan
Senator, go ahead.
the disruption to the economy. There's no way that you can plan for what the spin-off, the negative spin-off of conflicts could be to our local economy. This is something that threatens our very survival as a people, at least in the short term. If even in the long term, I mean, how do you recover from things like from people want to travel to a place where they are safe. We are known the world over for being a destination that is safe. When you come here, we don't really care who you are. You come here on vacation, you have a good time, you experience our culture, we treat you as best as we can. Our hospitals, we are known for that. We have invested a lot in that. Even back to the slogans when I was a teenager, the tourism is everybody's business. In my early 20s, these are things that we have invested and we have taught our people culturally to be welcoming. Whilst we explore for hydrocarbons within the region, and we find and so on, and other states are developing and they're developing their industries. They have a responsibility. It's not just about Guyana and Trinidad. They have a responsibility to the rest of us, right? And I've actually heard the president of Guyana say that, after the Guyanese people come, the people of CARICOM. And so he has acknowledged that. Well, it's time to discuss, to make sure that we don't forsake, what we stand for because of one or two gains. Nobody loses, nobody wins, with that type of conflict that would come out of this. No, there'll be no winners.
Yeah, absolutely. And
just to quickly
yes,
say,
Mr. Diallo, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just to quickly say, I think we missed a golden opportunity at the UN General Assembly, where most of our prime ministers would have been, and we hear nobody talk vociferously, as we are saying, about this build-up in the region and its threat to our peace. And that is something that, I think we missed an opportunity to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And gentlemen, one final issue here, and Senator Rahman, I'll start with you on this question. Of course, that has to do with the Age of Civil Legal Responsibility Bill, and some of it's an amendment to the current legislation that exists. But I want to get your perspective. Of course, the bill was only read for the first reading, brought for the first reading in Parliament, so obviously there was not an opportunity to have any substantive debate on it. But this is a two-part question. One, did you have conversations with the private sector on this? Of course, we had the Attorney General on the program, and of course, she indicated that civil society will be consulted on this, sort of belatedly, in my view, because I felt as if they should have given the public a heads up that this bill was coming. But that's one. And secondly, from a faith-based perspective, of course, we have heard from the Christian segment of Grenadian society, but from the Muslim segment of the society, I would also be curious as to your take on the proposed legislation, and if you were to offer the government any suggestions, should the bill in its current form be totally withdrawn, or should it should there be adjustments to how it's framed and brought before Parliament again?
So let me start with this, Dr. Bob. The government, from the comments of our Prime Minister, they intended to do a good in an area where we know that there are problems. We know that there are cases of incest and other things, and abuse of minors, so to speak. We know that that is an issue that we don't talk about much, but it exists. And the social services and so on would know best. And so government has to see how they can come up with some legislation to address some of the problems. I think government ought to understand, at least by now, that they need to do significant consultation on this, because there are elements to these bills that are not taken well by a large segment or segments of the population. There are certain rights that parents have, that God Almighty has given to parents. In Islam, it's called an amana. An amana means a trust that you are given children, and you have the responsibility to raise those children in a manner that God Almighty is pleased with. Why do we have to do that? Because from a religious standpoint, we have to answer. One day we have to give account. And who are we going to give account to? Well, we're going to give account to the same Creator that caused us to be here in the first place. He's the one that told us what is wrong and told us what is right. And so rules and our laws in society are generally based on the ethics of Scripture. whether you're a religious person or not, whether you subscribe to a religion or not. That is the reality. The reality is that we know stealing is wrong because God Almighty and His prophets told us that that is wrong, right? Because some people, if they steal, to them it's a good because they get in something for free, right? So we know it is wrong because we have been taught that it is wrong. And so when we look at morality and we ask ourselves the question, are we more, in terms of a society, more morally minded and in practice now than we were 50 and 40 and 30 years ago? The answer is no. Even when you look at how people dress for carnival 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and you look at them now, the dress and the costumes is totally different. So, and the problems in society and the habits and what is allowable in society, we are not more morally responsible now than we were back then. Now, from an Islamic standpoint, marriage is something, and from a Christian standpoint as well, because my family comes from both backgrounds. Mom's side is Christian, and father's side is Muslim. Marriage is a key component of the fabric of society. If you want to destroy a society, destroy the institution of marriage. And that's a recipe to destroy a society. Because if you aren't getting it at home, you'll get it outside at home, if you know what I mean, right? And so the point is that if the law has 16 years, that you could get married at 16 years, is that a problem? How many Grenadians are complaining that we shouldn't get married at 16 years? How many Grenadians are getting married, period? How many Grenadians are getting married at 18 years? The figure is very low. Can you tell me 5 people you know that are 18 years that got married? Or 2?
At least not in this era.
So what is the purpose of raising the age to 18? To do what? To serve who? The law is there to be meaningful. The law has to have an impact. The law has to serve the people. It has to make sense. It has to be of benefit. So to raise it from 16 to 18, and at the same time to give consent to the minor from 18 to 16 is reversing what is morally right. Now, as I've said, people, our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and so on, they would probably have gotten, I'm sure we know aunts or grandparents and so on who got married in their teens. You hardly have that today. People want an education, they want to pursue other things before they get married, and most people get married in their 20s or 30s. Some people don't even get married at all, right? Yeah. They miss the boat on that, right? And that's the reality of the society today. So to change that from 16 to 18 is for what? So I disagree with that, because God Almighty says that we should get married. So it's a good thing to do. And if you want to say, well, if you want to get married under 18, you need to have your parents' permission. There are certain religious communities that will want their children to marry early. I'm not saying at 16, but they will want their children to marry early, because it can save them from sins. It can save them from the traps of going out there and having relationships. Adultery is still a sin. Fornication is still a sin according to the scripture, even though it's done every day and there's no accountability. If we believe in a day of judgment, we're going to have to account. So that's one aspect of it. It should remain as it is. There's no need to change it, because nobody's getting married at 16 or even 18, right? That's one. So that's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. Second is the one that gives the allowance for a 16-year-old to have full rights over their body. And another is one that gives the minister from 12 to 16. In that same proposition, that same bill, it says in the paragraph lower down that under certain circumstances, the minister can give from 12 to 16 the authority for that person to go and to get medical treatment. And as I said, I'm sure that the intention is good, but a minister cannot usurp the rights of a parent at any time.
But what happens in a situation where that parent is the perpetrator that would cause that child to seek the medical care that they need?
Consultation is needed throughout the length and breadth of Grenada,
yes,
with religious organizations and so forth. We have teachers that teach children, our small children. If there is abuse in the home, a lot of what, for example, children express themselves in different ways. You can ask the child to draw, for example. So mental health doesn't only affect adults, it affects children according to the home that they're in.
Yes.
You can ask a child to draw in art class, your family, or ask to draw, what makes you happy or what makes you sad. And you can see by the drawings of a young child some of the things that they might be going through that they might even want to tell you. We have to have trained experts. We have to have them in the primary schools and in the secondary schools that will consult with the teens. We have to have people that are so qualified in psychology that they can go to the schools, or that they can be part of, we can give the teachers the support to receive that education, so that the children have a friend in a teacher in a school. Meaning, when I say they have a friend, they can feel comfortable to speak. And so we can deal with certain things and report certain things through other systems and other people around that child, so that the child doesn't have to go back to the same parent or to the spot or to their parent, and they will say, no, stop making up lies and so on. We are recognized that there is a problem, but there are other ways to solving that problem. We don't take away from and the other thing is that the vast majority of parents are not delinquent. The vast majority of parents are not delinquent. So the vast majority of parents will have a problem with that the law that takes away certain powers from the parent. So they will have a problem with that. I have a problem with it. And so you have to find another way to be able to reach those children through programs, art programs, psychology. You can have interviews with children. You can sit and talk to them. As I mentioned in my last budget speech, ethics is something that needs to be taught. If a child from small knows what is allowed and what is disallowed, they might tell a friend. They might tell their best friend. They won't come and tell me and you, or the teacher even, but they will tell their best friend, Daddy does beat me, or this and that and that, right? And their friend now could go and tell the teacher, right? Because the friend will say, but no, we learned that this is wrong. So the job of parents are not doing the job that they're supposed to do or they used to do, because we already established that morality is not what it used to be. So you need to have an ethics program. And I volunteered myself to assist in the development of that program, an ethics program that will teach people, and this is not a particular religious doctrine. Ethics and marriage are things that we all agree on, So I think I've said a lot on that.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, I thought getting your perspective on this was so important for me when I was discussing that with my producer, because I suspect I knew where you were going to come, but it was good to hear from you. But Mr. Diali, any thoughts on that? Of course, you don't have to make the decision around how to vote when that bill comes up. But would you be in line with what Senator, your predecessor, has articulated here? If in fact you were debating this in the upper house of parliament?
I am. I do agree with a lot that Salim has said in
Yes.
terms of the institution of marriage, in terms of our children and the exposure to different things. Now, if this bill intends to assist the authorities would curb the issues of abuse and so on. I don't see it either by lowering the age and tampering with the age. Now, the education of our children, sex education and otherwise, happens in various mediums, whether it's at home or not at home, whatever the association with social media platforms. So the kind of questions and the kind of information a 16-year-old has in terms of their body and their rights to their body and so on, and all of these things are out there. They are open to it and they're exposed to it. But the parents, those, and I agree, Salim, it's not all of us that have bad parents. There are single mothers that may be challenged and will need help. And here the government needs to come in and see how they could help the children and the parents to, I know there's a program advertising about good parenting and what needs to be considered, particularly targeted at
I think there's
single
also
mothers.
a parenting program in social services. I'm not sure if that
Correct.
still exists, but I know that there was one, yes, or
So
that there
I
is
think there
one.
is work there to be done, but I don't think, based on scientific fact, that the brain of a 16-year-old is developed to a point where the decisions that they can make regarding their body, sexual things, sexual different aspects of their sexuality is at a brain level that could make them make a proper decision. The influence, of course, would be significant from outside parties, and this is something that I believe we have to guard against. How do we filter the information? And how do we support the children when they come to say, Daddy or Mommy, tell me about this issue, and you be truthful to them and let them know. But your brain doesn't develop properly until you pass 18, 21. And both our boys and girls need to understand that, and parents need to understand that so they could keep their children close to them in the communication. And I support Salim. I think the bill is being taken, in my personal view, to make us get more, um, you know, modern, if you want to use that word, with other bills in the more advanced countries and what is happening. But their societies have not functioned better than ours anyway, with the lack of the religious interface with our children and our parents and the general community. So I think that we need to review this. Further deeper consultation needs to be happening. I think the bill needs to be put on pause. It is on pause in terms
Yeah.
of its first reading. So let us see what happens. But I think it can go forward, but a lot of major changes need to be happening. I don't think interfering with the age is going to help with the intent of the bill if it's to get our children in a situation where they are less exposed and vulnerable to abuse at various levels.
And Dr. Bob,
Absolutely.
Dr. Bob,
Yes, yes, Senator.
I think that the government has they know. I think they have realized. I mean, they didn't push it through. They just did the first reading,
Yeah,
and
it was the first reading. Yes.
right. They could have tried to push it through, and that is commendable. I don't want to play. When it comes to important issues like morality, and when it comes to important issues like fisheries and so on, I'm not interested in playing politics.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in playing politics. Period. Right. With national issues. Right.
Yes.
Whatever is in Grenada's best interest, and I think that they realize that. And the fact that they have not, they're a little bit silent on it is perhaps because they're developing their thoughts on that matter. And I think we're going to see some changes. And I hope that because a lot of people have spoken up on this before us. I think this is the first time the private sector people have said anything about this.
Right.
I've spoken to people in the private sector, and they share my viewpoint, perhaps not maybe all, but the ones that I've spoken to. So that's and when you look at larger economies in the world, Western economies, we can't take morality from them. Sorry to say, because you look at school shootings and you look at the kind of problems that they have in their society, and they can lead us in certain areas. They can teach us in certain areas. But we have our culture is a culture that is a religious one. We have ground in the faiths that whether it is Christianity, whether it is Islam, we identify, the vast majority of Grenadians identify with a religion. That is different from many countries in Europe today. They don't identify with a religion. They may say my parents or so, but I don't identify with any religion. We are not like that. We still hold true to a lot of the religious principles. And so if they want, for sake of modernization, to bring certain bills, we have a right as the Grenadian people to say what we agree with and what we don't agree. That's what democracy is all about. And we have a right to be who we are and to protect that.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, very insightful thoughts there. But I will give Mr. Diali an opportunity for closing comments. So Diali, I hope I didn't, I don't know if you go to the beach. Do you go to the beach in the evening, in the morning?
I try to do both, whether morning or evening.
Okay.
But yes, I do.
Okay. So over to you, sir, for
would,
some closing comments. Yes.
Yeah, I believe that, the budget reading on December, early December, 1st of December, or thereabout, is going to be interesting to see how the government navigates, the areas that Salim and I identified as challenges that they will face. It will be also interesting to understand what is going to be the report on the performance of the country for 2025 in terms of project implementation and all those other areas. And I think the suggestion of the bond, the 5 million, is a very good and positive thing for diversifying people with monies who can invest and look at different instruments to invest. What I didn't hear is how the government intends to use the $5 million that they raised. And I will suggest put in part of it to GDB to help small business and micro business get a PV system in place so that they could help to defray costs going forward. So I will close with those, and I hope my
Yes.
good senator will take them forward in his budget debate as he does when his time comes in December.
Yes, very well. Thank you so much, Mr. Diali. Senator, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, if there was a good suggestion today, that was it.
Yes.
Yes, that $5 billion there, that would definitely help all and sundry within Grenada to make life a little easier for them to carry the burden. I look forward to see what government has in store. We are living in changing times, in trying times. We have to be united as a people. All the solutions are not going to come from government, and we need to help them to arrive at the best solutions. With regard to the bond, at some point, I would like to see, to build on Senator Diali's comment, I would like to see a specific use, a bond, a vehicle for a specific purpose. So a bond to modernize and increase, to do certain aspects with regard to the port. And we know that money is going for there. So we know what we're investing in. And I know what I'm investing in that particular asset, or a bond for Polaris. I guess the government mentioned that this is a pilot, right? So they're going to see what sort of interest they get from this. And I believe that it will be subscribed to. And perhaps if it is successful, I would like to see a deepening of what is offered by giving more specifics, because you hear Senator Diali just mention it. How are they going to use it? How are they going to use the 5 million? Well, you can actually tailor. We know we need certain things for the port. We know we need some expansion there, and some have called for even a different location and so on. We know we need certain things within our country. We know the health sector there, the government has plans and so on. So we can use bonds in the future that are specific vehicle to raise funds for certain national projects that the entire country can get behind.
Absolutely. As we like to say here on the Bob Report, gentlemen, we will be watching the space. And of course, these economic matters are just as important as the politics. I always say to my producers, we here on the Bob Report, we try to focus on the constructive and the educational in ways that we can educate and empower citizens with respect to the issues that are affecting their individual lives. So thank you, gentlemen, for bringing clarity to a number of these issues that we have raised here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Our viewers and listeners, this has been a segment on the pulse of the Grenadian economy, having a conversation on some of those important economic issues confronting and affecting the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique. Of course, we had Mr. Chris Diali and his successor in the Senate, Senator Salim Rahman, addressing those issues in a wide-ranging and extensive conversation on those. And of course, we'll be watching the space with respect to the budget and what will be coming down the pipe for the 2026 estimates of revenue and expenditure. And certainly, we want to thank them again for providing clarity and bringing their own perspectives from the private sector on these range of issues. And earlier, we had a conversation about non-communicable diseases and premature deaths in the Grenadian society. Of course, that is a major issue affecting the Grenadian society now in respect of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we want to thank our first guest for that. And of course, on behalf of the producers of the program, of course, we are not fully live this week where we were able to take your questions, but certainly we thank you for your participation in the program as well as for your comments. On behalf of the producers, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week ahead. Take care.